I'm here with the legend, the man, the myth, the legend, Grant Gershon. This is our second conversation. Grant, as almost all of you will know, is the music director of the Los Angeles Master Chorale, also symphonic and opera and choral conductor around the world. Also, just one of my favorite musicians on the planet. And Grant and I have known each other for years, and I've just finished my 4-year residency as artist in residence with the Master Chorale. And in that time, I got to work intimately with Grant and watch him do what he does. And what I'd like to talk about today, Grant, if you're game for it, is two things. One, I want to talk about The Sacred Veil, which is this new album that is coming out, featuring the Los Angeles Master Chorale, of course. And then second, I just want to talk to you about a philosophy of conducting and leadership, if you're game for this.
Sure.
Watching you do what you do, we'll get into those weeds in a bit, but I just marvel at how you did what you did, and I'd like to just see if we can talk about that a little bit.
Great.
Let's start with Sacred Veil, and if you'll let me wax poetic for 30 seconds. It's rare that a conductor will give their group to another conductor or another composer like myself, and you did this often during my tenure. You let me conduct whole Christmas concerts or concerts of not only my music, but other contemporary composers. I conducted a little chamber opera that I wrote, The Gift of the Magi. And then I wrote this piece, The Sacred Veil, and not only did you let me conduct the premiere, but you let me conduct the recording. I can't tell you how rare this is in my world, even as a composer, even as a conductor, for someone to build, as you have, a program over 20 years. And as I'm always calling it, your Ferrari. And then you just give me the keys and say, you're not just saying, take it out for a spin and bring it back in 10 minutes. You know, it's like, you can have it for several months and come back and please try not to scratch up the paint job. Can we start there? Just it's not flattery that I'm trying to look for that generosity of spirit that allows you to let go this thing that you've worked so hard to make.
Well, thank you, Eric, for that. It's interesting because in the orchestral world, right? I mean, this is not unusual at all.
Yeah, it's true.
Any symphony orchestra has a range of guest conductors and artists in residence who have this very special relationship with the ensemble. And so, I suppose, I take that philosophy. I was assistant conductor at the LA Phil for 3 years in the 90s. And my job basically was to sit there. Like 90% of the job was to sit there and watch other people conduct. And so not only did I see, Esa-Pekka Salonen day in and day out, but I also saw all of the guest conductors that came through the orchestra during that time. And one of the things that I learned, of course, is that the orchestra would sound different with each person on the podium.
You could actually hear the difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only hear the difference, but you can see just like body language and just a way of expressing music. And I guess the big thing that I learned, because I was fairly young at the time and naive, was this kind of revelation that there isn't any one right way to do it. And that actually having a multiplicity of viewpoints and of voices is healthy and will build a better, stronger, more interesting ensemble. And so I think we took that philosophy then to the LA Master Chorale. And I'll just say, for you and I, Eric, when we first talked about you coming on board with the Master Chorale, I think for a hot minute we thought about it being composer in residence.
Yeah.
And then it became very clear to me that that's way too limiting. Just in terms of enlightened self-interest for myself and the ensemble, we thought that artist in residence because would be just a more appropriate and a more kind of enveloping idea, because again, then we have not only you writing music for us, but being with us on the podium, And also, I have to say, I loved being able to watch you conduct other people's music as well. I remember the Andres Hilborg piece. Wow, it was absolutely brilliant,
Uh,
and
the
and it
piece is
was
brilliant. My conducting was not brilliant.
no, guarantee it was amazing, and
Well, if we can speak even to that moment, I will tell you, I learned so much from you over the 4 years about myriad different parts of the discipline of conducting. But one of them was with this piece. You suggested it to me. Do you remember? There was this program, and
yeah,
you said, "Well, how about this? This is great." I didn't know it. I knew Hilborg's music, only his symphonic music, and I remember looking at the score for the first time and thinking, "Oh my God, this can human beings do this? Do you know? Like, is it?"
those sports, it's like that
Yeah,
tall.
it's crazy, and the parts are really difficult. And there's a few bits at the end that he's amended, right? That are just it's I think it's physically impossible to
Right,
actually do.
right.
But then you hear people performing it, even master chorales, like actually there's a way to kind of navigate that and make the impossible somewhat possible. But one of the things that I discovered for the very first time conducting that piece was that my function as a conductor, especially during the performance, was it wasn't my job to I wasn't crafting these emotional worlds. This is the world I come from when I'm writing my own music. Really, my job was make sure everybody is on the same page at the same time. And I know that sounds so pedestrian, but actually it was a huge revelation for me. To just think, and my sole job is that, right? That actually, if I lose a measure, we're all doomed, right? Actually the train goes off the cliff. And so it was also a level of concentration for what is that piece, 11 minutes or 12 minutes,
Yeah, yeah.
where your only job is to keep everyone together. And that was a huge lesson for me in terms of sometimes what a conductor's role is, which is just to let all of these amazing professionals do their job, and you just keep them on the same train track.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, I'll go back to Esa-Pekka Salonen, who for me was like a mentor. And I remember Esa-Pekka talking about one of the conductor's roles is to create a framework in time within which all of the musicians can do their best work. And that piece is really, I mean, that's like the distilling that to its essence, because you really are creating this structure within which everybody can do their part. And if they didn't have that structure from you at the podium, as you say, the train would go off the
Yeah,
cliff
off the cliff.
very quickly.
That's brilliant that you learned it from him, because I see that in every performance I see him conduct, Esa-Pekka Salonen, that I wouldn't call it clinical, but I would say it's this profound faith in the musicians on stage. And then it's
Right.
just, okay, so here's what you need from me, and here's what I need from you. And let's just and I like the way that you described it, that space, that you're giving them the space to make music into.
Right.
And that I think then takes this great faith in their ability as musicians. And so starting with that, I noticed when I was conducting the Sacred Veil, for instance, that it's not just that the singers of the Master Chorale are pros. It's not just that they sing the right notes, the right rhythms, they show up on time, they just do their gig. But then they also have access to this immense vulnerability, right? With the Sacred Veil, it's so delicate. The themes and the texts that we are singing are so human and close to the bone. And it seems, I don't know if that's a professionalism, right? The ability to open one's heart that way. But
Right.
I do believe, especially after having worked with choirs all over the world, I do believe you somehow have fostered or created a space for that. And I wonder if you can speak to that, if it's conscious. Are you thinking about that when you build a program, when you teach a piece?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, first off, I'll say that, I mean, the Sacred Veil, I mean, you would have to have a heart of stone, a heart of coal, of course, not to be just intensely moved and to feel vulnerable singing this music. So I mean, that's I remember when we before you had finished the whole piece, and you led the group through I Fall,
Yeah.
um, and and that was one of those experiences. I was in the audience watching in the rehearsals and the performances, and it took several rehearsals before, of course, the singers could get through the piece without losing it, because I mean, it's evoking an experience that is so close to the bone, and that so many of us have felt
Yeah,
firsthand.
that kind of experience.
So that has to be said right off the bat with Sacred Veil specifically. But I do think with the Master Chorale, you know, we've really fostered a sense of family over the years, and it's interesting because I think for some people, knowing that the group is all professional, there can be the assumption that it is then just, you know, people like showing up because, you know, they're because of the paycheck, and, you know, you do your thing, you sing beautifully, and then you go off and forget about it. And we've really built an ensemble over the years, and it predates me. I mean, it goes back to my predecessor, Paul Solomonovich, and probably the founder of the Master Chorale as well, Roger Wagner. But I think particularly in the last, you know, 15 or 20 years, we've really developed this sense of trust with each other, within each section of the ensemble, and then from me with the singers back and forth, so that it's a cyclical energy. It's I certainly get as much from the singers as hopefully I'm giving to them, and that we're making music in real time. We've lived a lot together too at this point. You know, we've had several deaths in the group over the years, and births as well, and relationships and marriages, and so, you know, there's something about this ensemble that feels very very special, and emotionally open, and I hope that that's something that people feel in every performance that the Master Chorale gives.
I certainly do, and I think that, I mean, it's really interesting. So you were saying like when we were doing those first movements with the Master Chorale of the Sacred Veil, and that I remember also during those rehearsals, I don't think I had really realized yet how close to the bone the material was for some people, as you said,
Yeah.
and so I saw people actually, being moved or breaking down during rehearsal and having to leave, that it was that difficult. I think the thing, though, that I found is that I've now conducted parts of it with a lot of different amateur choirs. And oftentimes with an amateur choir, there's no question they're going to feel. You know, you read those words on the page, either from Tony or from Julie, right? And then some of that music is just, it's designed to be an unrelenting look at the thing that you can't look away. It won't let you look away. So absolutely you will feel. What I find with the Master Chorale, however, is that they're not only vulnerable, but then they're giving it back. That there's I don't know if that's a professionalism or just the essence of a great performer, but it's not just that they're being impacted by it, but then they take that and then they open their heart in a specific way to give that to the audience. Do you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean.
And that
Yes.
is so rare. And I think all the time as a conductor, two things. I think one, how does one foster that? Is there a conscious way to build that into the rehearsal process? And two, is it necessary? You know, I often wonder that you must have had performances where you thought that I was just flat, like you were exhausted, you had jet lag,
Sure.
you didn't feel anything other than you know, what time does the bar open, right? And then you get off stage and people are weeping, and it's the greatest thing I've ever experienced. And somehow you didn't necessarily need to have the emotional world for the people listening to it. So I guess it's a two-pronged question. I don't even know where to start with that. Is can you foster it, and does it need to be fostered?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I don't know the answer, except that I will say that, you know, I do think that, I mean, everything happens in rehearsal, right? It's
Everything.
like
Absolutely.
the performance is the result of everything, the whole process, right?
I agree more.
And so I have always felt really strongly in our rehearsals that that people have permission, like, permission to fail, permission to take risks, permission to laugh, because that happens a lot in our rehearsals.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
And I go back to something that I learned from another person who was kind of a mentor for me, which Peter Sellars, the great
Right.
kind of iconoclastic stage director. And I remember Peter, we were working back in the early 90s together, on an opera, and we were working with a choir from Germany that had been very kind of, I mean, they were very uptight, and I think that just, their process was very much a fear-based.
Yeah, don't make a mistake, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I know that kind of leadership and the
right.
effect that it has on a group.
And Peter, in the first rehearsal with them, I think he spent the first 45 minutes just talking to them like this great monologue, and got them laughing uproariously. I mean, he's just being like super goofy, and then would as Peter can do, like turn on a dime and be dead serious and talking about our place in the wider world, and just and the implications of the music that we're doing on how it reflects on the human suffering, the human condition. And so through the course of this, you could see that group start to just melt, like the right, the armor coming down. And Peter said afterwards, when we were talking about it, he said, well, here's the thing: if you treat people like artists, they will respond as artists.
Huh.
And that's something that I've always taken to heart. It's mutual trust, it's mutual respect, it's the expectation that people are going to bring their whole humanity to a rehearsal, and to the repertoire that you're working on, and then that you yourself also are going to be open
That's right.
and right, and vulnerable. And I think that's something now that's pretty deep in the bones of the Master Chorale. And when I listen to the recording now of Sacred Veil, I feel like I really hear that, and I hear it in every phrase.
Yeah, I do too.
And
That's the amazing.
yeah, so
Yeah,
proud.
it's built into the DNA of the group, and it's um, like you, after having done this for so many years, you really start to see that it's and this will make you blush, I know, but it's because of the person standing at the front of the group. It's, I find, even more than conductors in front of orchestras, conductors in front of choirs radically change the sound, right? You go to any choral convention and you just see one group after another group, and they're all basically the same physical human beings standing on stage, right? They might be a
Right.
little older, a little younger, but it's like, yep, yep, yep. And then the sound is so dramatically different. And it's not just the sound, because something about singing too, just for me, it's delivering terabytes of emotional information, right? And you can hear when a choir somehow is tapped into that, whatever that thing is. And maybe the most important word that you said was trust, right? That they have this trust, this ability to that. Yeah, I suppose that in a way their leader expects it from them, or wants it from them, or doesn't know any other way. I'm like, I know for myself, I don't have a plan. It's not like I ever,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're like this. If you do you go into a rehearsal thinking I'll build empathy into this piece, or more just let's get the notes and rhythms and then let's.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of that. It's like you build it in layers, right? But yeah, it's like the the meaning of the piece, and the kind of ethos, the gestalt, whatever. Um, it's like that emerges through the course of learning the music, and singing it together, and kind of layering everything in. While you were talking about like the difference between orchestras and choirs, I was thinking about just the fact that, I mean, it's obvious, but the the musical instrument that is a human being, right? As opposed to, the most complex mechanical instrument. I'm sitting here at my piano, for instance, which is a marvel of engineering,
Yeah.
right? Or a great cello or violin or whatever. Um, but but nothing can match the complexity of all of this, sinew and tissue and flesh and bone and blood and everything that is the mechanics of the vocal instrument, and
Yes.
then the fact that it is inextricably linked to our soul, to our mind, uh,
Yeah.
to our being.
And our unique being, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
generally pianos have different colors around the world, but it's generally a piano sounds like a piano. But like you say, each human being sounds, I can hear Ella Fitzgerald singing, and it's Ella Fitzgerald. It couldn't be any other person on earth, right? The fingerprint is so profound. And so yes, I agree with you that just the instrument alone sort of separates the voice from all the other musical animals.
yeah, exactly. Because there's the possibility to draw on so much more, and of course, then you add the poetry. You add the fact that we're communicating words in text,
Mm.
which again, the the greatest pianist and or violinist, it's only the sound that they're creating, and with us, there's that extra layer of direct communication through the words. So it's not surprising that a chorus can have so much potential
Mm.
for variety of expression and for an enormous emotional range of communication. And I mean, here I am, I'm preaching to the choir as we
No,
always
no,
do,
no.
right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's the marvel of it, right? Because I think uh, sometimes I think that we're as choral conductors or someone trying to lead a group of singers that we're half musician and we're half almost like Peter Sellars, we're almost half stage directors because there's this emotional component that one needs to guide the way a stage director might direct an actor. And I think any great actor will tell you, a director would come over and says to you, just say it like this. You're not going to get anything, right? But if you can find this right combination of magical words that only speaks to that actor, that puts something in their head spinning. I remember when we were doing Sacred Veil and ugh, we were singing the eighth movement, which is Delicious Times, and it's Julie's poetry, and she's singing about having to shave her hair, and her children's response to that, and she's so brave, and she's trying to be light and almost funny about it. And I remember the first couple times that we sang through it, once we were getting the rhythms and the music down, and everybody was just trying to keep a straight face because the text is so powerful. The sopranos and altos were really singing it like a funeral dirge. They were, I mean, it was the saddest thing ever written. Do you know what I mean? The poetry
Right,
is
right.
so tragic. And at some point, I was, as we were rehearsing the music part of it, I was thinking, how does one say to the group, how does one just slightly alter the approach to it? And I think I said something super simple that was along the lines of, um, uh, for her, let's take Julie's voice and show the strength and even the joy in this moment. That while there's this tragic event that's happening, actually there's no greater joy for her than these moments I think it was just the word joy. And suddenly the next time we sang it, it wasn't just that it was lighter or faster or sprightlier. You could hear joy in the music. Do you know what I mean? That's
Yeah, yeah.
extraordinary to me. That
That is so interesting because I mean, what it tells me is that it's a matter of unlocking something that was there, right? Or something that
yes,
they had the potential to find this in themselves, right?
yeah,
And
that's right.
by using the right imagery or the right connection, you can unlock that in people. Um, and yeah,
Sorry, but not to interrupt, but then do you find yourself as a conductor, do you do all of that in the room and on the fly, kind of the way Peter Sellars does, right? Where it's just he's feeling the energy in the room, or do you prescribe a little bit of that? Do you look at an upcoming rehearsal and look at, it's not that at this moment, then I'll introduce this idea of joy, but that ultimately here's the goal. And I know the group, you must know the group so well now. You know these people's faces and names and lives, and they're
Right.
friends, they're
Right.
family,
Right.
like you said. So you must also know, okay, this is the moment in the rehearsal when we add the next deeper layer. Do you think that way?
I think you do have a sense of that, and what you said earlier about having a goal for a rehearsal is so important,
Mm.
and that's something that I always try to have real clarity about as I'm preparing for a rehearsal. Is where do I think we're going to be? Where do I anticipate that we're going to be at the start of the rehearsal in the first 15-20 minutes on this piece? Where do we need to get to by the end? And then it's just a matter of figuring, well, how am I going to get there? How am I going to pace it? Um, you know, that helps me to not get lost in the weeds and
Yeah.
to like have eye on the prize. Um, but it also, it everything that you're talking about with the group makes me think about another aspect of the relationship between the conductor and musicians, which is so important, and that's ownership. That
Oh,
the
yeah.
that
Yes, yes.
that your singers and players feel feel ownership of the material, um, and that they're not doing something because some guy, usually some up there on the podium, is telling them this is how you should do it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not that at all. It's again creating a framework so that people can find something within themselves, unlocking something, that then they can explore for themselves, build upon,
Hmm.
put their own personality and being into the music. And of course, in a choir, the amazing thing is then you get that synergy
That's right.
of all the people around you bringing themselves into it, and then you're unconsciously finding these points of connection, and and as you've talked about so eloquently, aligning the heartbeats and the
Yeah.
breath and just
Yeah.
like everything together. And it's the magic of being in a choir when everything is kind of working the way it should be,
Yeah.
and it is what is making all of us so insane right as we talk here at the beginning of August 2020. And that's exactly what has been taken away from us for the time being.
That's it. That's it. Is that
Right.
intangible thing that happens when you sing together in a room.
Yeah.
And I love that, this idea of ownership, Grant, because I think that's the entire thing, right? That's, if you'll indulge me, I'll tell you a 30-second story about when I first learned this.
Yeah.
Or I really learned this. I was this must have been 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, but I was I did a concert with the Minnesota Orchestra, so phenomenal orchestra, and the choir, the Minnesota Orchestra choir, just amazing group of musicians, and I did a whole concert, some of my music, some of some students that I'd gone to school with, um, one of the pieces I did was a piece I'd written called Equus, and it's crazy complicated. And I'd written a choir part, all of this. Now, the thing that I didn't tell anybody, even after the rehearsals or even after the performances, was this was the very first time I had ever stood in front of an orchestra and a choir at the same time. I'd never done this before.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the hallmark of my career is I just keep faking it till I make it. And so far people keep letting me. Okay, you're gonna let me stand up here. I'm gonna do it. And so there's this bit in Equus. It's about 16 bars. I think it's letter K. That every time I conduct this piece, I lose sleep over it. It's one of those, and you especially would relate to this because it's John Adams-ish, where you're the only person on the beat, and everybody else has their own logic, but if you don't keep it together, the whole thing, right? I just described the last 3 hours of of you conducting the Girl of the Golden West, right? So uh, in those 16 bars, we got to the final dress rehearsal, and I realized I I am the problem. Like that the musicians are all good enough. They
I
can
hate
play
when that
the
happens.
yeah, right. You know that feeling when you
I
think,
know
oh
that
my
feeling.
God, it's actually me. And I tried everything I could think of. I practiced and practiced and practiced. And so I said to the players, and I was lucky that I had a great concert master, because if you have a concert master who isn't on your side, this can go south quickly. But I said to the entire group, I said, I've got an idea. I'm going to conduct right up to letter K, and I'm going to hit letter K, and then I'm going to put my hands down. And 16 bars later, I'll catch you. Okay, let's come back.
Yeah.
And so we're coming up to it, we're coming up, and then boom, and I hit it, and I drop my hands, and I swear you could just feel the entire orchestra sit forward, lean in, right? The singers, boom, and I mean, it's giving me chills just even thinking about that moment. And it was such a profound lesson for me, which the first was, oftentimes what I think I'm controlling, I'm not actually controlling. Do you know what I mean? Like all of this, and it's right. And actually, you're not necessarily even making the music. It's everybody here. But then second, it's that the moment they feel ownership, the moment it's like, oh yeah, we got this. They brought this kind of joy to the music, this ecstatic energy that I just wasn't getting. I don't think I could get. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that is a profound lesson,
Yeah,
life lesson,
I
actually.
learned it. I learned it in the fire. And then since then, I've heard. I think it was Claudio Abbado say that sometimes when he's conducting, that uh, he'll intentionally obfuscate. He'll be conducting and then just sort of do one of these, that you can't possibly follow on purpose, because it's like, go, you run now. I'm letting go of the reins. Run right now. I'll bring you back when you need it. But that was a big, big lesson for me. This I see you do, not to make you blush, but I see you do this effortlessly and endlessly. There's not a moment that you're not in control or that the vision isn't yours, but there's this dance that I find you do where you let them dance, you
Mm,
push, they pull. It's almost like millisecond to millisecond. And I was so inspired, and actually transformed my own nascent conducting abilities watching you do this. Do,
that's
do
it's
you?
very kind of you to say. I mean, I'll just say super briefly that I mean, if that is true, it's hard won. I mean, as you alluded in your story, I mean, you can be doing this for years and years before you um, have kind of the trust to let go, and I mean, I don't ride horses, but I can imagine that like there's a certain kind of analogous aspect to like the less is more thing. I don't know. Conducting is just such a weird thing, and we could talk for days about that. I mean, I'll say for myself, I was not a born conductor at all. I mean, I never even imagined that I would be a conductor actually until I was in my early 30s. And then my first couple of times on the podium were just like a disaster. I mean, I was so uncomfortable and just
Yeah.
felt so awkward, and like what was easy for me at the piano was it to express was impossible on the podium. So it was simply, just trial and error and falling on my face and getting back up and having supportive people around me, and
Yes. Yes.
and people that would kind of maintain trust. And it was just, the process at to get to a point where you're comfortable enough, and I guess comfortable enough in your own skin and in the pressure cooker that being on the podium can be, that, as you say, you can simply let go and then feel that's
Yeah.
the right solution for that particular moment, that you need to have your singers and players galvanize,
Mm.
and again, just and to take ownership, and to kind of invest in their own pride in the ensemble. And I mean, that is the key, when you build that into a group over time, then they feel and they know that they can do anything. It's like they they kind of lose all fear, or most fear. at least.
Yeah, and like you say, then they feel this pride in the group, and then they want to bring their A game, right? And then what's beautiful is you don't have to motivate anymore. You know, there's not that classic, come on, dude, team. It's just actually, if anything, sometimes you have to pull the reins back. It's like, okay, everybody stop singing at full bore here, right? We have
Right.
a long we have a long way to go. Yeah,
Yeah.
we got 6 hours of rehearsal today. So and that's what you want. That's absolutely what you want, right? Is you want to, like you said, kind of guide the horse instead of, you're not going to make that horse run if it doesn't want to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually think that the horse analogy is good and far reaching. Also in that, especially with orchestras, you know, you get on a horse and it knows immediately if you know what you're doing or not. I've always found it's the same thing with an orchestra. You can get about 10 seconds into a rehearsal and they're like, yeah, all right. You know, you can just feel from the group, like, follow the guy sitting in first chair. That's who we're following from.
Right.
Well, Grant, I wanted, like I told you, I wanted to keep this short and sweet, and let's not belabor this. This is beautiful. There's so much wisdom, and I know now that you've just re-signed with Master Chorale for another 5 years. Is that right? Another 4 years?
Yeah. I'll be here till the 2025 season. You know, they it's like Charlton Heston. They'll pry it out of my cold dead hands.
but
But no, I mean, I actually what I will say is that I feel like there's so much that we still have to do. There's so much unfinished business.
Yeah.
And the group and the organization is continuing to grow. And you know, I've been saying this a lot over the last couple of months. I really feel like our most important and impactful work is probably still ahead of us. And especially in response to everything that's going on all across the country and all across the world right now. The choral music, when we're back, back where we need to be, we have that extra sense now of mission and responsibility. And I think that when we're back to making music again, I mean, all the choirs all around the world, I think that it'll be infused with that sense of what we're doing is special, is unique. It's literally giving a voice to our common humanity. And there's a wonderful phrase. It's actually the title of Kamasi Washington's, one of his albums, which is the harmony of our differences, the harmony of differences, which to me is what a choral organization is in a microcosm. It's not that we're all trying to be the same thing or sound exactly like the person next to us, but we're creating harmony with our differences. And so if we can put that forward into the world coming out of this crisis, I mean, that's kind of like, that's the next step, I think, for choruses everywhere in our ongoing evolution.
You're so right. And as I wrote to you earlier, thank you for leading the way on this. You and the Master Chorale are doing such a brilliant, beautiful job leading the way forward. It's humbling for me to have, to spend 4 years with the group and to know that I got to play just the smallest part in that, in everything that the Master Chorale is doing. But ultimately, the Master Chorale's vision and again, to embarrass you, but specifically your vision, thank you for that. It's exactly the kind of leadership that our art form thirsts for right now, I believe.
Eric, thanks. We've got an amazing team here, as you know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's it, Grant Gershon. I wish you well. Let's talk again. Let's make this a monthly thing, shall we?
Cool. Yes.
Next time we'll get into how to make a really good martini.
Okay, I have some thoughts.
Thank you so much, Maestro.
Hey, Eric, thanks.
Take care.